All right, recording is started. Good morning, everybody. I'm calling this meeting of the Public Safety Communications Task Force to order. It is 11:16 on October 22nd, 2025, and I'm Barb Neal. The meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to the task force webpage following the meeting. Let's start with our usual roll call of task force members. Please verbally acknowledge your presence when I call your name. Dan Batesy.
Here.
Paul White.
I'm here.
Ron Kumitz.
Here.
Jim Mack.
Here.
Okay, and that looks to be it for now for task force members. Also joining us, of course, is Emily from Department of Public Safety as our administrative support, and our project management team, Rick, Dom, and Elizabeth from Televate. And I am seeing no one this morning from Mission Critical, but we do have a few members of the public. So I will call your name, and actually two, it looks like. I'll call your name. Well, actually, I think everybody knows everyone that's here. So welcome Chris Pedotti from Department of Public Safety and Martha Morse from the Hartford PSAP. And I think we've got everyone covered there. Okay, so approval of the agenda. Do task force members have any changes to the agenda today?
No.
Okay. Hearing nothing, we'll consider the agenda approved and move on to approval of the minutes. So the minutes that are under consideration here are those from the October 8th regular meeting. That's regular meeting number 61. They were distributed to task force members and are available on the website. Are there any changes needed to these minutes? If not, do we have a motion to approve the minutes from October 8th?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
And I'll second.
All right. Thank you, Jim and Paul. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes from October 8th, raise your hand or signify by saying aye. Hands are up.
Aye.
And I hear the aye from Ron, so the minutes are approved. So let's go right to Dom now for project updates. Sorry. Go ahead, Dom.
All right, thank you, Barb, and good morning, everyone. Over the last couple of weeks, the focus of the task force working groups has primarily been on Tier 1, the physical regionalization approach. We had meetings over the last couple of weeks, 3 meetings on the 9th, 14th, and the 17th. And we have prepared recommendations that we can review today here at the task force meeting. We also had the opportunity to provide information on some of the existing recommendations that have been prepared by the Tier 2, Tier 3, and governance working groups to the E911 board, which Barb organized, and it was attended by some other task force members as well. And there are still some ongoing action items from some of those other working groups that are being pursued in background as well, including work to further define a potential LMR approach, LMR radio approach for simulcast cells. We have also been attempting to schedule the cost and funding working group, have had difficulty doing that, so that has not been established yet, and we may have some further discussion on alternate approaches there. That's essentially a summary of the activity. I don't have the agenda in front of me right now. Do we want to go into the Tier 1 recommendations, or we have other business first, Barb?
Sorry, we typically would ask for any questions from task force members about your update here. And I just have a comment if there are no other questions. regarding the funding working group. And there have been some difficulties with scheduling. We think we might have had some wires crossed in some cases. And so my understanding is Elizabeth is going to put out a new poll this afternoon. So I think this applies, it's Mike, Dan, and Paul, right, that are on that working group. They're gonna put out a new poll this afternoon to try to get that working group scheduled. Sooner rather than later is gonna be the name of the game. And if scheduling doesn't work out, then Rick will be in touch and we'll talk about alternative approaches we might have to take. So it's a little bit of an update on that piece of it. And then I keep asking if there are any questions, and then I don't allow time for people to comment. So are there any questions for Dom on the update?
Well, I was just going to comment on the scheduling of the funding and cost sharing working group. The most recent poll, which is still active, covers the period of October 31 to November 11. So I don't know that we want to offer dates beyond that. I mean, it's going to be cutting it too close to go time.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'll just comment. I have time sooner on the earlier side of that too. And I know that part of that was holding up on me. We did reply on Friday. I don't know how that didn't come across. So we've got plenty of time. I don't need to extend the dates. I just need to, if we're going to send another poll, I'll just reply.
So if I can jump in here.
Sure.
I did get your response, Mike, on Friday. That is for the time period that Paul just specified. Rick is asking me to send out a poll for sooner than that. In the past, previously, we had not successfully found days and times sooner, but we're gonna try again because we don't want to go out further than the dates that are in that poll. So we're gonna try again earlier.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, great. That's excellent.
If I can add to that, Barb, may I add to that? So
Sure.
if the poll goes out, I would ask everyone's, so it's going to go to Mike, to Dan, and to Paul. And if you could respond as soon as you get it, I mean, it'll be helpful, because if we don't have a date, if we can't find a common day and time, like I said, maybe we have to move to the evening. Because right now, what Elizabeth did tell me, and Elizabeth, after I had suggested that, after I spoke to Mike yesterday, and he told me he received the poll, and he did complete it on Friday. Elizabeth wasn't working that day, and I didn't follow up because we had decided that maybe we weren't going to find a time. We're going to bring it back to the task force. So now that we have that poll, Elizabeth and I did communicate before this meeting, and we still didn't have a common time. So I said, well, let's compress it a little bit and see where we go. So if you could just be responsive enough to get us right away, then we can react as soon as possible to get back to each of you to say, okay, this is going to work. What about this time frame? And that's all I'm asking. Just as soon as it crosses your plate, please give us a response.
You guys are all being really nice. I will be very quick in responding.
And
Just be like, Mike, get on it. Don't wait.
I will note here that we do have a chairs meeting with Televate at 11:30 on Monday, and I would be willing, if the others are, that means Dan and Paul, to open that time slot up if that's of value, because I think the funding group's important enough. So if it goes into that hour, we can maybe touch base with the chairs and vice chair by email or set up another short meeting, but that might be another option for your poll, Elizabeth.
And I did commit to Rick last night when we talked that I can move stuff around on my schedule. When I take the doodle polls, I throw my availability, but if it doesn't work out, you guys always can come back to me and I can move some stuff around. So
with that said, I appreciate that, Mike, and to all the members of the working group. If we got to do that today, could we still do a Friday? I mean, do we have enough time to get the notice up for the 24th? Could we start that earlier, or do we have to push it to the 27th?
Only if
Friday
it's at
afternoon.
the end of the day and you get in before the 48-hour mark. So that's risky,
Right.
technically possible.
All right.
I mean, right now, if we just, I mean, I know that just because of the urgency of this, I can do one or two on Friday. I could do an hour-long meeting starting at 12, 1 or 2 on Friday.
This could also be a special meeting, which would give us a little bit more time. If you, Paul and Dan, does 2 o'clock on Friday work for you?
It's fine with me. I know Dan, looks like Dan has stepped away for a minute, but it's fine with me.
Dan might have had to step away. He said he might have to.
Could we do 1 instead?
Fine with me.
It's not in the 48 hours. You're going to have to move fast, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so 1 p.m. on Friday is on the table. Let's wait for Dan to get back.
Okay.
And would I schedule that for 60 minutes or 90 minutes?
90 is fine. I can do, if we started at 1, I can do 90.
Okay.
It's scheduled for the full 90. There is a conflict on that Dom and I have, but he can,
We can
I
work
can
that
stay
out.
and he could go. We can work that out internally.
We can work that out.
Yeah.
Okay, when Dan comes back on, someone will need to remind me to come back to this. So 1 o'clock on Friday is what we're looking at. I'd love to get it scheduled within, right now so that we all know what we're doing. Okay, so.
And with that said, Elizabeth, just prepare the email to send out for the notification just in the event that we're ready to go.
Yep,
soon as
I
Dan
already
says
have it
I'm
on
re-
my screen.
I thought you would. Okay, thank you very much.
And since we're taking a moment here, let me see if I can see Dan's schedule. Well, he's blocked out for Friday, but we'll check with him and see how accurate his calendar is on that. Okay. On then, Dom, to the Tier 1 working group recommendations.
Yes, thank you. I will move into that. I have a PowerPoint that the Tier 1 group has been utilizing, and I can display that now. Hopefully everyone can see that. We'll
Yes.
put that into presentation mode. Hopefully that, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Barb mentioned, this is the preliminary recommendations for Tier 1, which is the physical or facilities-based regionalization. The working group members are Michael Wright, Paul, and Barb. And the goal of this group was to provide these priorities and preliminary recommendations in support of physical regionalization. To start with, the working group reviewed the information, of course, in the system planning report that was put together by MCP. There were significant findings that were displayed by MCP here, which we're reviewing, and most of you know from previous discussion, the findings included the 37 communication centers that dispatch state of Vermont first responders. Of those 37, those are broken down by there's 6 PSAPs that, of course, also provide dispatch services. There are 6 out-of-state dispatch centers that dispatch state of Vermont personnel. And then there are a total of 25 dispatch-only centers within the state. MCP put together what they called regionalization benchmark criteria, and we'll display that in the next slide. They showed that 13 of the in-state centers meet some level of their benchmark criteria, and that is based on a number of different items. There's also 11 of the communication centers that identified they had potential for expansion. And MCP's recommendation addresses a phased approach of potentially regionalizing existing dispatch centers. I mentioned the benchmark information. This is what MCP used to provide their recommendations. Oh, sorry, jumped ahead there. There's both a category 1 and a category 2, and that's based on a number of items, including 24/7 operation, for one thing, the population served, the incident volume and how that relates to the total volume within the state. Also, they refer to minimum staffing, et cetera. And of course, all this information is included in the MCP system planning report, which you can review. Using that criteria and MCP's recommendation, the working group did review the options, the 5 options that MCP provided. This is the description of those options, and this is right out of the report. Option 1 was to regionalize 12 dispatch centers. Option 2, and I have some other summaries of these in the next slide, but just from a top level, option 2 was actually adjusted the number of PSAPs, and the working group decided that, since that was not part of the scope of the task force, that option should just be boiled down to the dispatch impact. And that's what we'll summarize in the next slide. Option 3 provides additional regionalization, reducing the number of dispatch centers. Option 4 eliminates all dispatch centers except for the 6 PSAPs that, of course, provide dispatch service, as well as, and eliminating them all except for 2 that have special circumstances, primarily that have volunteer only or that dispatch only for their immediate area, such as the University of Vermont. And there was also an option 5, which was based on a county PSAP approach. Again, that adjusts the number of PSAPs, but that also adjusts the dispatch approach as well.
Hey, Dom, Ron Kumitz has a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
My question was on the previous slide. You back up for a second? It may be that I just didn't wrap my head around that, but
yes, sir. Trying to back up. Okay. Yes.
So it says a dispatch center qualifies for consideration of regionalization if it does not provide 24/7 service, has 6 or more category 1 attributes. But the first of the the category 1 attributes is provides 24/7 operation. Shouldn't that be doesn't provide 24/7 operations?
Yes, I believe that's true, Ron, based on their criteria. Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to expect a star for paying attention.
Okay. Excellent. You'll also note, Ron, you've probably seen in the report, there is a table, one of the appendices towards the end, which lists all of the current dispatch centers and how they, how this criteria would apply to each of them. And then the column all the way to the right summarizes how many of these criteria they meet, essentially. And then those that meet a larger number of these regionalization criterias were identified or recommended by MCP to regionalize sooner than later. if you will. Okay, moving on, these are the 5 options again, and I mentioned we kind of boiled those down a little bit differently since some of them addressed the number of PSAPs in the state, which was not part of the scope of the task force. So we looked at these options, essentially ignoring the PSAP operations or PSAP recommendations. So when you boil that down, option 1 was to regionalize 12 dispatch centers. So in other words, identify 12 dispatch centers based on those criteria that would merge or be absorbed by other centers. Option 2 actually took that a step further and regionalized further additional dispatch centers. Also recognizing the 2 special cases that we mentioned before, Mad River Valley Ambulance and the University of Vermont. Option 3 didn't address any further dispatch regionalization. That was primarily related to PSAP, so there's no further discussion there. Option 4 was to essentially eliminate all of the regional dispatch centers that are not PSAPs, with the exception of those 2. And then option 5 took kind of a different approach and based it more on a county model, although there were 8 recommended PSAP/dispatch centers, so some obviously included multiple counties there. I thought it was important to review the options as provided by MCP. The working group reviewed those and discussed those in great detail. However, the working group chose not to have a favor or focus on any of these options and chose to present an alternate approach. And that's what I'd like to describe next. So the recommendation coming from the working group was to provide this alternative approach that is focused on specific requirements and benchmarks for all the dispatch centers to meet to either improve their performance or to encourage them, if you will, to merge with other dispatch centers to be able to meet these benchmarks. So the baseline was to continue with all dispatch centers initially, so not to regionalize any existing dispatch center. And the 3 sub-bullets here describe kind of the different types of dispatch centers that we have that we discussed earlier. For example, all 6 PSAPs, of course, also provide dispatch services. We identified during the discussion, the working group identified what they called an independent or standalone dispatch center. And that would be a center that, of course, receives 911 calls from one of the PSAPs, but dispatches only for their specific city or town. For example, I think one of the examples of this was Springfield, I believe. And then also there are what the working group termed as regional communication centers, and those that are those centers that receive 911 calls transferred, but may provide dispatch services for multiple cities and towns, so more from a regional standpoint. Given this concept, all dispatch centers would operate subject to specific policy and technology benchmarks that would be defined by the governing body via interaction, of course, and discussion with a broad collection of stakeholders. So the anticipation would be that a governing body is in place that has various working groups or subcommittees that develop specific policies and technologies that they recommend all dispatch centers would meet. And over time, essentially gradually, the governing body would recommend incorporating these benchmarks to require as a requirement for the dispatch centers to meet in order for them to continue receiving resources, for example, that could be provided, and we'll describe what those are, or some form of accreditation or recognition by the governing body, somewhat to be determined. So the goal here is to encourage improvement at all dispatch centers and also allow for natural regionalization as it makes sense based on the benchmarks. We also have agreed to develop a survey to be sent to the dispatch centers to provide some outreach to see if there are any centers that have considered or are currently considering joining or merging with another center, and to try and get some feedback from them as to what their considerations are as to why they have not done so, or what would encourage them to do so. A couple of key components to this approach are the benchmarks and the resources that would be available to those centers that agree to meet those benchmarks. So first, the benchmarks, what the working group recommended was to have key performance indicators or KPIs. And there is a industry document developed by APCO, which defines specific KPIs for dispatch centers. There's various categories, which we show here: mission critical dispatch. There's some additional dispatching KPIs that essentially go a little bit further into the dispatch services. Then it also addresses technical systems to be used by the dispatch centers, and as well as the quality assurance, quality improvement KPIs. So we would anticipate the governing body having a stakeholder group to develop those specific KPIs that would be used for recommending to each of the dispatch centers. Also, the working group felt it was important to have compliance to the policies and procedures that are developed, again, most likely by subcommittee of the governing body. Those would be focused on specific training requirements based on national standards, certifications, and also that are based on national requirements, but also incorporate specific Vermont requirements as well. Also felt it was important that all dispatch centers should have use of the CAD, anticipate a state-funded CAD system similar today to what's done with Valcor, but the vision is anticipated there would be a new CAD developed as part of the recommendations from the task force. Regarding staffing levels, one of the key benchmarks that MCP referred to was minimum staffing levels, and APCO does recommend a minimum of 2 dispatchers on staff at all time within dispatch center. That may not be, the working group recognized that might not be practical for some specific centers, and felt that it wasn't necessary to require specific staffing levels, but only to require meeting of the specific performance requirements and the performance benchmarks that are to be developed. So if a dispatch center can meet those benchmarks, independent of their specific staffing levels, that's fine. If they have difficulty meeting those benchmarks, potentially based on staffing limitations, then the governing body could work with that dispatch center to develop a revised staffing plan to allow them to meet the requirements. Again, I mentioned the governing body a number of times here. The role of the body would be certainly development and then oversight of these benchmarks for the various dispatch centers. Any questions on this portion? And the final slide I have describing this.
So I do have, sorry, I do have a question, Dominic. I just couldn't come off mute fast enough. I apologize.
Yes, Mike, thanks.
So when we talk about the minimum, my only concerns are, just coming, again, guys got to remember where I come from, like an IT background. We did help desk cover this, follow the sun support, where other, parts of the country would cover when there wasn't coverage in a certain, like if the phones kept ringing and roll over to the next. And I get that the goal here would be to like sharing those resources, but if we're moving forward and we are setting a standard, having the appropriate coverage so that can be done, shouldn't there be at least some minimum for the amount of staffing? Or you're saying the standard will cover that without, maybe because you know what I mean?
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Probably has better experience with this.
Well,
If you have a comment, please go ahead.
jump in with my understanding of that. If a center was able to meet the benchmarks that are defined, like through these KPIs, like how quickly calls are answered, how quickly calls are dispatched, there are national standards associated with all those things. And if they're able to do that without us saying you must have X number of people in a seat at any given time,
Right.
Would that be acceptable? And the working group thought it would. As an example, we do that with the 911 system. We don't define specific staffing levels, but we do define performance metrics that are tied to the reimbursement that they get from 911. So it's not like a huge carrot really in their budgets, but it is the mechanism we use rather than saying you have to have two in the seat. As long as you can answer 90% or better of your primary catchment area calls, and 90% or better of all calls presented to you from any source, you're good to go. So that was the thinking on that.
That makes sense. Thank you for the explanation. It's a lot clearer now. I appreciate it.
Well, and to add to that, one of the other discussions we had was, one of the indicators that allow them, if they're satisfying it, allow them to have less than ideal staffing is what's their backup plan. If things go to heck and all of a sudden they're inundated with calls and the one person on duty can't handle it, what's their plan? Do they have technology and policies in place where they can divert calls immediately to some other center that picks up the slack?
Right.
And if they can demonstrate that they have all of that addressed without having X, like Barb said, X number of dispatcher behinds sitting in chairs, as long as they're meeting those KPIs, we didn't think we needed to define a specific number for staffing.
Sounds good to me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And also, Paul, I agree with that. And also some of the things that were discussed were potentially having other personnel on call that could be called in if they did have a time frame when they were being inundated with calls, or potentially tying it with some of the other recommendations coming out of the other working groups where there could potentially be regional personnel that could fill in difficult times. For instance, if someone was off for training, there might be someone that could provide to come in and assist during that time frame or during a time of a high volume of calls, etc. And that was actually one of the potential resources as well. So we mentioned this recommended approach would have required benchmarks and also potential resources. So these are essentially the carrots, if you will, for those dispatch centers that agree to meet the benchmarks as defined by the governing board. There would be resources that could be available to those dispatchers. The first few here, I think, would be, available to all dispatch centers, certainly in the state. Training opportunities, common training courses that I know are being developed even today. Potentially a state-funded dispatch academy to assist with that training. Common policies and procedures that are developed by a group established by the governance body. Job descriptions that could be used for standard staffing requirements. And potentially some technologies as well. And we highlight these as access to these technologies would likely be available to those centers that agree to meet the benchmarks. So those that wanted to essentially work on their own without oversight would not have access, for example, to access to a statewide CAD, including licensing fees, access to the Rapid SOS platform that is being rolled out, potentially LMR resources if regional simulcast cells are developed as are being envisioned by the Tier 2 group. Dispatch centers within those given areas could have access to those LMR resources, and that could lead to shared maintenance agreements with other dispatch centers to help share the load to maintain those LMR systems. Potentially staffing for shortages and training, as we just discussed. I believe Tier 3 talked about a hybrid staffing model that could potentially be used to help out centers that found themselves understaffed for a given period of time. And then also, as discussed in some of the other working groups, the potential for non-dispatch activities that could be supported by a common group to reduce the other workload or reduce distractions from dispatch personnel, including administrative duties, records, warrants, et cetera.
Dan has his hand up.
Yes, Dan.
Yeah, Dom. So I just want to flag this, and I don't really, it's not really a question, but I just feel like I need to say it. I think the challenge that this recommendation poses is we're saying that essentially there's an unlimited number of dispatch centers as long as they can meet some very minimum standards. The challenge, of course, is with that, we're going to have to extend to them all of these potential resources, and that's a very expensive proposition. So in other words, the more dispatch centers we put in play, the more expensive things are, like CAD and licensing fees and all those other issues that are going on out there. And I think it's only a matter of time until somebody says, why do we need 48 dispatch centers at a cost of X per dispatch center? Wouldn't it make more sense to shrink it down?
Certainly a valid, observation, Dan. Whether or not we see that happening is difficult to envision right now. Of course, it's it may be hard to envision additional dispatch centers coming online. But the intent here would be to utilize these benchmarks to assist those existing dispatch centers to improve their service, to get the minimum level of consistent service throughout the state, If your scenario does occur, then there would be the opportunity to potentially add additional benchmarks required in order to encourage regionalization.
When 911 first came online or was coming online, 24 agencies out of the agencies that were dispatching at the time put in to be 911 facilities. As 911 rolled out these standards, that number started shrinking down to what we finally had. I would foresee some of the same things occurring here, that as we start adding standards that you have to meet, that some of these agencies would start dropping out.
I think that's a very important outlook on this, because, again, just sort of thinking in my head now about budgets and legislative asks. I mean, no one's got any money to do anything, and I think it's going to be very important that we have a measured approach to this, or at least measure expectations to say, it's not our intention just to say, you can have as many dispatch centers as you want, and we'll give everybody exactly the same thing, just because. I think we're going to have to say, if you want to do this, there's going to be standards. And if you want these resources, you're going to have to live to those standards. And I think it's going to be a very important message to push, that we feel that that's going to shrink down the total number. Again, I'm not necessarily saying we need to shrink it down, but I just think the bigger that number is, the harder it is going to be to fund. And anybody with half a notion into this is going to say, that's a lot of money going in a lot of different directions.
So as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking it might be good to include in the recommendation that we would not recommend the addition of new dispatch centers unless there's some element of consolidation, involved, right? So if we took two of the non-24/7 ones and built them into a new one in some part of the state, or if that was someone's plan, then that may fly. But to just say, oh, look at all this stuff that's going to come from the state, I'm just going to stand up my own dispatch center tomorrow, I think is not what we're getting at all. So I think that I would say we might want to make sure we clarify the intent there.
That's certainly a reasonable approach, I believe.
Okay.
Any other questions? That's what we have concerning the recommendation from Tier 1.
Can I jump in and switch topics really, really briefly, and then we can go right back?
Yes.
Yes.
I see that Dan is back, so we have to ask about timing for that meeting.
Yep, that's where I was going to go. I just want to make sure there was no other questions on the Tier 1 working group recommendations. Okay, so I had a little side text conversation.
Sorry, I didn't unmute fast enough.
Oh, go ahead, Ron.
So I guess my thoughts are a little bit in line with Dan's, in that part of what we're also trying to encourage here is making all of the resources that we're recommending be developed, like a statewide CAD system, available to the first responders, because it benefits, from the fire service perspective, it benefits all of my people and makes their jobs safer if our dispatchers have a CAD system and can, allocate resources and mutual aid plans and all other kind of cool stuff that come with having a statewide CAD system. And if a dispatch center decides to go Ma and Pa Rube Goldberg super cheapy and give out cut rate dispatching, and a select board or some specific agency leader decides to sign on to save a few bucks, it's not in the best interest of the first responders to get pushed out of that. And so right. I think that giving them an out to do that, to not become part of the mainstream and have these resources is not necessarily in the best interest of first responders or the community. Maybe I'm not really. Do you kind of understand what I'm getting at there?
I think you're right on, Ron. I think that's exactly what I was in my head thinking about is, one, we don't want to encourage the ability to expand on the cheap. And secondly, we want to encourage an increasing quality. And if that means a shrinking number because of limited resources, well, that's the byproduct.
A good example in my mind is, up until only very few years ago, there were agencies out there who were clinging to their fire phone systems, and they just wouldn't give them up. They thought they were best thing ever, and of course, they were cheap because the phone company provided them for free. At some point, the phone companies had to be the bad guy and say, "We're sorry, we can't get this hardware anymore, so you're screwed. You got to come up with a better idea." But I think we don't want to we don't want to put them in a position where we give them a way to skirt doing the right thing and do things on the cheap, because it's not in the best interest of either the community or the first responders that are part of their community.
What about this? So we don't want to encourage the ability to expand on the cheap. So that's sort of the intent, right? Which also goes to no new centers without some element of consolidation. And any new centers that are stood up must immediately meet whatever benchmarks are in place.
Well, I think that, yes, I think that is sort of going in the right direction. And I also think that I think that to be eligible for any funding, because remember that money is always the big driving thing here. So to be eligible for any funding that becomes available for dispatching, they really need to meet more rigid standards than having a radio and a cordless telephone to answer their calls while they're watching television.
The other thing that comes to my mind regarding your potential scenario there, Ron, is, and of course, the working group hasn't met to address this yet, but one of our goals is to make this equitable, the cost equitable for all areas, all towns, right? So would there, if we put together some plan that has each town paying a certain amount based on some criteria, whether it be population, grand list, or some combination, then there wouldn't be an opportunity for somebody to, or a dispatch center to encourage towns to join them on the cheap, because they'd be paying whatever their recommended fees are for their town or their jurisdiction. So if they're going to be paying one level one way or another, they would certainly want to do it to with a center that provides them the best service.
Yeah, I think that all I'm saying is that I think we need to keep that in mind, that
Yes.
if we give them a way to to work the system so that they can operate on the cheap, they're gonna find ways to do it, and we need to structure what we're doing so that we encourage people to do things on a standardized, like in some sort of legitimate scale, to meet standards that are pretty uniform across the board, not minimalistic.
Right.
And not just for new services either, right? I think this process should envision how we improve the existing system as well. And that may mean saying to some services out there, some agencies out there, hey, you got to do better.
Well, and
Exactly.
I think that's built into it, right? So if we
That's
establish benchmarks over a
certainly the
period of
intent.
time, essentially we're like grandfathering in the existing ones for at least some period of time where they can make a decision about whether or not they can or cannot meet these benchmarks. And then it sort of evolves from there.
Yeah, well, I think part of it was we didn't, I guess the legislature can do anything, but short of some kind of really strict measure in statute, how do you tell a community, like, for example, I'll pick a Bennington Police Department, primarily dispatches just for Bennington, but they do also dispatch for the Pownell Fire Department.
Yeah.
How do we as a state come in and say, no, Bennington, sorry, you're not allowed to dispatch for Pownell Fire anymore because you don't want to do X, Y, or Z? We were trying to make it sort of all carrot and as little stick as possible.
Well, I mean, keep in mind that whenever you're offering a service for compensation, I mean, the state regulates plumbers, they regulate electricians, they regulate private investigators. So I think that if a community is approached by a dispatch agency, I mean, I'm trying to generalize, but you know, if a dispatch agency is out there going to a community saying, well, you know, we can give you cheaper dispatching services, and the people in the select board and stuff don't really, you know, this is something that they don't even really want to think about. All they're seeing is that they're saving money. They, you know, they may not understand what they're compromising by making the decision to save the money.
Yeah. And Paul, I would respond to that. I think we absolutely can do that. I think now, by the way, I'm not advocating that we come out tomorrow and say, Bennington, you're all done, close up shop. I think you can set a time-based standard to say in the next 5 years, you have to come up to this. And I think the stick we have is that we're giving them money and say, if you want to continue getting our money, this is what you have to do to get it. And if you don't, that's okay. That's your choice. But
Yeah, well,
I think it will be absolutely imperative of this governance board to say, these are the standards. And if you want to dispatch in Vermont, this is what you have to do to get the money associated with that.
well, and I think what you just described was included in Dom's presentation, that it was, you know, over a period of years, we would gradually tighten the noose, so to speak, that, you know, starting on day one, we're going to be kind of loosey-goosey and grandfather everybody in, but over a period of years, the requirements are going to get tighter and tighter and tighter.
Yep.
Okay, I am going to pause the discussion right here for a minute. I think that we may want to return to it, but to Elizabeth's point a minute ago, I had a sidebar conversation with Dan via text. Dan can do 12:30 on Friday for a 90-minute meeting or 1 o'clock for a 60-minute meeting. So my question goes first to Paul. Does 12:30 work for you on Friday?
This Friday, I am available anytime.
Okay, and Mike Dungis, does 12:30 work? Okay.
It's on my calendar. It's blocked. We're ready.
Okay, now, even more important, Elizabeth and Emily. Elizabeth, can you get the information to Emily so that she can warn this meeting within the next 21 minutes?
I can send out the invitation momentarily, and then we'll get the agenda over.
Okay. Emily, is this remotely possible for you to get?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Do we need to pause this meeting for that to happen between Elizabeth and Emily, or can we continue?
You can continue on my end. I won't speak for Elizabeth.
All right. Thank you, Emily. Elizabeth, what do you think?
Yeah, you can continue.
Okay. All right. We got the meeting scheduled 12:30 on Friday, and Elizabeth and Emily thankfully can multitask and take care of this while we continue. So back to the tier one working group recommendations. That seemed like a good pausing point, but is there anything more we want to discuss around this? All right, it sounds like no. Go ahead, Dom.
My takeaway is that there's a couple of stipulations we wanted to add. One being that no new comm centers would be allowed to establish themselves without some type of regionalization occurring. And any new centers would be required to meet the benchmark at that time when they establish service.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes, I think that's accurate.
Right.
Anything else?
So just to be clear, so another way to say that is if someone's going to stand up a new dispatch center, they have to meet the requirements that we set forth immediately, right? That's what Paul was kind of saying earlier. Like, it makes sense. Like, grandfathering people in if you already exist, great, but the leeway kind of goes away if you start tomorrow and you're brand new, right? And I think
Right.
that's a fair.
Yes.
I think that's fair.
Or you could put a little wiggle room in there and say, in accordance with a plan for meeting the benchmarks that's approved by whoever the governance body is going to be, right?
Got it. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Great.
All right then. Are we ready to move on? Looks like it or sounds like it. So the next item on the agenda is to discuss the regular meeting cadence and content through November. So just to tee up this conversation, our deadline for compiling information for any legislative asks is really quickly approaching. So we essentially need to have all of our asks together before Thanksgiving in order to allow time for drafting the legislative requirements for drafting bills. And so we still have a lot of work to do. We made some good progress just getting that funding working group on the calendar. So I feel better about that. But that working group has quite a bit of work to do. And then just our regular, we still have some items to discuss around the governance recommendations. And I have a meeting with some of the board 911 board members who want to be part of that discussion on Monday. And then presumably they will, or some representative from them will come to talk to either the full task force or the governance working group for their thoughts on that. And then we also have the inorganic organic working group and the timeline working group that need to come together. So my thought is that we need to increase our regular meeting cadence to once per week until Thanksgiving. So every Wednesday from now until probably the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I was going to recommend that we bring any remaining working group tasks into the full task force meetings rather than trying to do these scheduling of individual working groups. I think I'm going to leave that up for discussion right now. Should we allow, I think we should allow the funding working group an opportunity to meet and at least go over some initial things, maybe give us an update on what they reviewed and what they see as the level of effort moving forward at our next full task force meeting. And then we need to decide what to do with inorganic, organic, and timeline. So should we take that? Go ahead, Mike. Yeah.
I'll throw a comment in. I think increasing the frequency of our regularly scheduled meetings to once a week makes sense. I almost would suggest, not that we need it, but blocking out more time for those meetings if we're going to get deeper into these discussions so that everybody's available. And then if we don't need it, we can obviously and early, but I think that we're kind of down to the wire, and I know I'm usually the most problematic one because of my schedule. So, that would be helpful to me if I had that space blocked and available.
Okay, and what do we usually block out? Let me check my calendar.
Hour and a half.
So we usually go 11:15 to 12:45.
I have 12:30 here.
Yeah.
Well, but there's a time blocked off for executive session as well, which I think goes until 12:45.
Okay.
We don't usually use it.
Should we go once per week? Increase the frequency to once per week and block out till 1 o'clock. So 11:15, an hour and 45, 11:15 to 1 p.m. Is that a good place to start? I'm seeing nods. Yes.
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 All right. 11:15 to 1 p.m. every Wednesday from now until Thanksgiving. And does everyone agree on that? Do we need a vote or can we just agree? Paul, I'm looking to you for guidance on whether we need a vote.
I don't think we need a vote for any reason.
Okay.
We're not deviating from our normal meeting time, just doing it more frequently. As long as they're warned.
Yep. Oh, I have a comment on that later, so don't you worry. Okay, so if we agree on that, increasing the frequency and the time, we'll do that. And then what about the working group work? Should we, and maybe Dom or Rick, what are your thoughts on, the content of the timeline working group and the organic, inorganic? Is it something that could be built into the regular working group over the next few weeks successfully?
I believe those two can, yes. I believe so.
Okay. Unless somebody on those working groups objects to that, I think it would be a good use of time to bring it into the regular meeting.
Well, I think if we don't do it, if we're going to leave it with the working groups, then what are we going to do in the task force meetings for an hour and 45 minutes every week?
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I'll give you your half an hour back.
Right.
I was making that assumption in my statement initially,
Okay.
Barb.
Okay, all right, fair enough. All right, I'm spending too much time on this then. And so then I think we could also build into each of these meetings, any updates on so we might get an update from the funding working group, right, next week. We might get an update from the governance conversation that's going on outside of a working group right now. And we'll just build everything from here on out into the regular meeting, with the exception of funding initially. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, if we're in agreement, then I will make note of that on my scheduling checklist, which I'll talk about in a minute. Anything else on scheduling? Okay. Next up is executive session if needed, which it is not today. And that brings us to new business. And we do have one item listed on the agenda under new business, which is the Tier 1 Working Group Open Meeting Law concern, which I'm ready to get into in a minute. I will ask, though, is there any other new business before I jump into this topic? Okay. Then let's talk about the open meeting law concern. So earlier, let's see, with some point last week or the week before, I became aware of a couple of concerns related to the Tier 1 working group meetings. One concern was that a meeting was held of that working group on October 9th, and it had not been warned actually at all. And then another concern came up about several days after that about an upcoming meeting that was initially warned within the required amount of time, but then had a scheduling update. We changed the start time from 2 to 1 or something like that. And that update was posted with only 23 hours notice instead of the required 24 hours notice. All of this happened within Tier 1 working group, and essentially was the result of both instances were a result of a series of human errors. So we have not received an official open meeting law violation complaint, if you will, related to these two items, but we did become aware of them. And so the best course of action seemed to be to take the steps that we would need to take if we had an official complaint. So the Tier 1 working group took those steps, and there are 3 elements that need to be addressed when you have an open meeting law violation or complaint of the same. One is that you acknowledge you acknowledge that there was an open meeting law violation or the potential for one in this case. The second element is that you cure that, you fix whatever needs to be fixed from having had that problem, and then you develop and identify specific measures that you're going to take to prevent a recurrence. So in the Tier 1 working group, that I don't remember the date, but in the Tier 1, I think it was October 14th, we did all of those things. So the Tier 1 working group acknowledged that a series of human errors resulted in these 2 potential open meeting law violations. And for context, our usual administrative support was not available the week involved, and the situations were not discovered until Emily returned on the morning of October 13th, at which point we took immediate steps to correct the situation. And for further context, I take responsibility for not coordinating with the person who was supposed to be filling in for Emily that week. That's Sonny from my shop. She'd filled in for Emily during the regular task force meeting, but I didn't complete I didn't close the loop with her as far as these additional meeting warnings, and that should have been done. So working group acknowledged that, and then we moved on to the cure. So we had to cure the violation that happened with the meeting that was not warned. And this is how we did that. We discussed, or we referred to the minutes from that meeting, which clearly indicated that progress had been made on the discussion points we've been handling all along. No final decisions had been made about recommendations on those working group objectives. And that progress was reviewed in its entirety. The progress we made on October 9th was reviewed in its entirety on October 14th. And members of the public were given an additional opportunity for input on those discussion points at a subsequent meeting, which was held on October 17th. Working group retook and corrected a vote held during the October 9 unwarned meeting related to the approval of a series of minutes from the working group. So we corrected a date that had been noted incorrectly and redid the vote to approve those minutes. So that should have cured, or that did cure, in our view, all of the problems associated with the unwarned meeting on October 9th. And then regarding the timing of the warning for the October 14th meeting, I already discussed this. We posted it originally within the 24-hour requirement and made an update to it with just 23 hours before the meeting. All of the regular attendees at the task force and working group meetings were notified of both the special meeting status and the corrected time for the meeting start. So, and part of the cure for this violation was that second, or that additional working group meeting that was scheduled for October 17th. We distributed all of the working group slides and notice of that that meeting on the 17th to all of our regular people. That was the cure. And so specific measures to prevent a reoccurrence or recurrence, I developed a checklist to be used by anyone running one of these task force meetings, whether it's regular or the working group meeting, to ensure that all the requirements are met for the scheduling of future meetings. And I will distribute that checklist to, well, I'll distribute it to everyone so that you can see it. Most likely it would be used by myself, Dan, or Paul, typically, when a meeting is being run. So the checklist will identify the date of the meeting, the type of the meeting, whether it's regular or special, the notice required, whether it's 24 or 48 hours, who will be warning the meeting. And I will go through that checklist at the end of this meeting when we confirm our upcoming meetings. So questions or concerns about the open meeting law and concern and how Working Group 1 handled those incidents? All right. Fair enough. We will then move on to public comment. Let's see, who do we have on the line today? Martha Morse, do you have anything you'd like to share with us today?
Nothing to share, but thank you everybody for the hard work you've put in.
Thank you, Martha. Chris Pedotti, how about you?
No, I'm all set, Barb. Thanks again for everything.
Great. Okay, that brings us then to confirming our next meeting date. So let me start with the working group meeting. The funding working group is going to meet at 12:30 on Friday, October 24th. Emily and Elizabeth are working to warn that meeting now within the next 3 minutes. That is a regular meeting requiring the 48 hours notice. And Emily is ultimately going to be the one to officially warn that meeting. And then regarding, go ahead.
I just saw the agenda.
It's warned.
Perfect. Excellent. So noted, Emily. Thank you. And Ron, were you going to say something, or somebody else's voice I heard?
That was me. I said I just saw the agenda come through.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you very much. So moving then on to the next regular meeting of the task force, we've agreed that we're going to hold them weekly beginning next Wednesday, October 29th from 11:15 to 1 o'clock. These will be regular meetings requiring 48 hours notice. So as Emily knows, that will need to go out by Monday at 11:15. I've made a note that Emily will warn that meeting. And that is that. Anyone have any questions for the meeting dates? Okay. Emily, I don't know how you do this or if we do it weekly or not, but we'll want to make sure we're putting on the calendar that those meetings will be weekly. I don't know if you do them all at once or just each week as they come up, but we can discuss that offline. Okay, so if there's nothing else, well, let me ask this. Is there anything else? All right, then I think we can look for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll
Thank you,
second
Jim.
that motion.
Thank you, Ron. All in favor of adjourning for today, raise your hand or signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. And the hands are up. Thank you all very much. There was a lot of information and things changing quickly through this meeting, and I appreciate your patience with all of it. So good luck at the funding working group meeting on Friday, and we'll all talk again next Wednesday. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.